She introduced me as just a boyfriend at her own party. I smiled, raised my glass, and said, "And she's an ex-girlfriend." Then I took her best friend's hand and walked out. Before we get into it, don't forget to like and subscribe, and hit hype to boost this episode. Drop a comment below with your city or country. I'm always curious where viewers are joining from. The apartment looked perfect. String lights hung in careful loops across the ceiling, casting everything in a warm, Instagram-ready glow. Each strand had been positioned with precision, creating layers of ambient light that photographers call the golden hour effect. The furniture was arranged just right, not too formal, but not too casual either. Conversation clusters. That's what Samantha had called them when she'd sketched out her vision on graph paper 3 weeks ago. Strategic spaces where people would naturally gather and talk and take photos that made her life look enviable. I'd helped create all of it, every single detail. The credenza against the far wall? I'd spent 2 Saturdays refinishing it after we found it at an estate sale. Samantha had the vision, but I had the sandpaper and the patience to strip away decades of old varnish until the original wood grain emerged. The throw pillows arranged in deliberately imperfect positions on the sofa. I'd driven to 3 different home goods stores, finding the exact shades she wanted. The bar cart in the corner, stocked with top-shelf liquor and artisanal mixers. My contribution, along with the vintage cocktail shaker I'd found at an antique market. Even the scent in the air, subtle vanilla and cedar from the expensive candles burning on the bookshelf. I'd picked those out, remembering offhand comments she'd made months ago about the ambiance she wanted to create. Spent last Saturday hanging those lights while she directed from the couch, wine glass in hand, pointing and saying, "A little to the left," until my arms ached. Spent last Tuesday picking up the catering order she'd chosen from the expensive place downtown that I'd quietly paid for because she'd overspent on furniture. Spent yesterday afternoon creating the playlist, 3 hours of carefully curated music that matched her aesthetic. Upbeat, but not too loud. Sophisticated, but not pretentious. The kind of background soundtrack that made conversations feel more interesting than they actually were. The housewarming party was her idea, her moment, her stage. I was just helping build the set. My name is Ethan. I'm 30 years old. I work in project management for a tech company. The kind of job that sounds boring at parties but pays well and gives me the freedom to actually have a life outside of work. I'd been dating Samantha for 14 months. A year and 2 months, to be exact. Long enough to know her routines, her friends, her insecurities disguised as preferences. Long enough to be integrated into her life in ways that felt permanent, or so I thought. The party started at 7. By 7:30, her apartment was packed with exactly the kind of people she wanted there. Co-workers from her marketing firm, friends from college who'd stayed in the city, a few influencer types with carefully maintained social media presences, everyone dressed just right, everyone holding champagne glasses and smiling with teeth that had seen expensive dental work. I wore what she'd suggested. Dark jeans, a crisp white button-down, nice watch. The kind of outfit that said, "I have my life together," without trying too hard. She'd actually laid it out on the bed that morning, along with a note that said, "Wear this, you'll look great." At the time, I'd thought it was sweet, considerate. Now I wondered if she'd just been styling me the way she styled everything else in her life, making sure I fit the aesthetic. She looked stunning. She always did. Samantha had that ability to make expensive things look effortless. Navy dress that hugged her perfectly, the kind that probably cost $600, but she'd never tell you the price. Hair in loose waves that had taken an hour to achieve, but looked naturally tousled, like she'd just woken up beautiful. Makeup that appeared minimal, but had required 15 products and 45 minutes of application time. I knew because I'd watched her do it while I got ready in 12 minutes. I'd complimented her when she'd finished, told her she looked beautiful. She'd smiled and said, "I know," without a trace of arrogance, just stating a fact. For the first hour, things felt normal. Good, even. I made small talk with her coworkers, learning their names and making mental notes about who worked in which department. Laughed at appropriate moments during stories about office drama I had no context for. Refilled drinks when I noticed glasses getting low. Played the role of supportive boyfriend at his girlfriend's party with the kind of attentiveness that came naturally to me. I'd always been good at this, at reading a room, anticipating needs, making sure things ran smoothly. Project management skills translate surprisingly well to social situations. You notice the details. The conversation that's dying and needs a new person injected into it. The guest standing alone by the window who needs someone to talk to. The moment when the music gets too loud and needs to be turned down a notch. Samantha noticed none of this. She was too busy being the star of her own show, which I didn't resent. It was her party. She should be the center of attention. I was happy to be the stage manager, making sure everything worked behind the scenes. That was our dynamic. It had always been our dynamic. She shined, I supported. She performed, I provided the infrastructure. I'd thought we were a team. Then Marcus arrived. Marcus worked in her department. Senior creative director or something equally vague and impressive sounding. Mid-30s, tall, the kind of jaw that looked photoshopped but wasn't. Expensive haircut, designer glasses that probably cost more than my monthly car payment, the kind of watch that whispered wealth rather than shouting it. He'd been mentioned before in her work stories. Always positively, always with a slight change in her voice that I'd noticed but never commented on. Marcus had this brilliant idea in the meeting today. Marcus took us all out for drinks after we landed the client. Marcus is probably the most creative person I've ever worked with. I'd filed it away in the back of my mind, not as a threat exactly, but as a data point, something to be aware of without obsessing over. Now, watching him walk in with the confidence of someone who knew he'd be welcomed, I understood why she talked about him so much. He handed Samantha a bottle of wine that probably cost more than my contribution to the catering. The label was in French, not the grocery store French that normal people buy, the actual French that requires a sommelier to pronounce correctly. He kissed her cheek just a fraction too long to be purely professional, his hand resting briefly on her lower back in a way that suggested familiarity. "Sam, this place is incredible," he said, looking around with the kind of appreciation that felt performative but practiced, like he'd complimented many apartments and knew exactly how to make it sound sincere. "Thank you. I've been working on it for months," she said, beaming. I'd helped her move in 6 weeks ago, but sure, months. They talked for a few minutes about the apartment, about work, about people I didn't know. Then Marcus's eyes landed on me, standing a few feet away, holding a beer I'd been nursing for the past 20 minutes. "So," Marcus said, smile widening in that way that meant he was about to establish dominance. "Who's this?" Samantha glanced at me. For just a moment, something flickered across her face. Not quite embarrassment, not quite calculation, something in between. Then she laughed. Light, casual, dismissive. "Oh, that's Ethan. He's just a boyfriend. We're not that serious." The words hung in the air like smoke from a gunshot. Just a boyfriend. Not that serious. The small cluster of people around us went quiet. Not obviously. Conversations didn't stop entirely. But there was a shift, a barely perceptible change in energy. The kind of social awkwardness that happens when someone says something that crosses a line they didn't know existed. Marcus raised his eyebrows slightly, clearly surprised by the answer. Even he seemed to sense he'd stumbled into something uncomfortable. I stood there, beer in hand, forcing my face into a smile that I could feel didn't reach my eyes. 14 months. I'd spent 14 months with this woman, helped her move, met her parents, spent holidays together, integrated my life with hers in dozens of small, significant ways. And in front of her coworker, her handsome, successful coworker who she clearly wanted to impress, I was just a boyfriend. Not that serious. Funny how one word can make you feel like a guest in your own story. I took a slow sip of my beer, letting the moment settle. Let her words echo in my own head until they stopped sounding surprising and started sounding clarifying. "Excuse me," I said quietly, voice steady. "I need to grab something from the kitchen." Nobody stopped me. Samantha had already turned back to Marcus, laughing at something he'd said, her hand touching his arm in that casual way that meant she was flirting. I walked through the apartment I'd helped her create, past the lights I'd hung, through conversations I was suddenly invisible in, and in that moment, walking through her party, I realized something profound. I was done. Not angry, not hurt, exactly. Just done. I spent the next hour watching. Not obviously. I wasn't lurking in corners or glaring across the room like some jealous boyfriend in a bad romantic comedy. I mingled, smiled politely, made small talk with people whose names I'd forget by morning, laughed at jokes that weren't that funny, helped someone find the bathroom, showed another guest where we kept the wine opener. But I was watching Samantha work the room like it was a performance she'd rehearsed, every gesture calculated, every laugh timed perfectly. Watching her touch Marcus's arm when she talked to him, lean in close when he spoke, throw her head back when he made her laugh, body language that screamed interest to anyone paying attention, watching her touch his arm, his shoulder, his back, casual contact that accumulated into something that wasn't casual at all. The kind of touching that happens in the space between friendly and flirting, in that gray area where plausible deniability still exists, but intent is clear. Watching her ignore me completely. Every time I drifted into her orbit, she'd acknowledge me with the bare minimum, a quick smile that didn't reach her eyes, a nod. "Could you grab me another drink?" That positioned me as staff rather than partner. then immediately return her attention to whoever she was actually interested in talking to, which was usually Marcus, but sometimes other coworkers, other men who might advance her career or stroke her ego. I was furniture, background, a prop in her showcase, the boyfriend-shaped object that made her look settled and desirable without requiring her to actually be in a relationship. Just a boyfriend. At one point, I stood next to the bookshelf, the one I'd helped her assemble from that complicated Swedish furniture store, spending 3 hours with an Allen wrench and instructions that might as well have been hieroglyphics, and did a mental calculation. In the past year, how many times had she introduced me to someone and made me feel valued? How many times had she said, "This is Ethan, my boyfriend," with pride rather than obligation? How many times had she included me in conversations rather than expecting me to entertain myself while she networked? The answer to all 3 questions was, not many, but I'd told myself I was being sensitive, insecure, that not everyone was demonstrative with affection, that her love language was different from mine. All the rationalizations people make when they know something's wrong but aren't ready to admit it yet. Around 9 o'clock, I noticed someone else watching too. Lena. She was Samantha's friend from college. They'd been roommates sophomore year, stayed close after graduation, though I'd noticed the friendship had cooled slightly over the past year. I'd met her maybe 5 or 6 times over the past 14 months. Quiet, observant, the kind of person who listened more than she talked and seemed to actually process what people said instead of just waiting for her turn to speak. She worked in graphic design, I remembered. Freelanced mostly, which meant she had the kind of flexible schedule that Samantha envied, but would never admit to envying because it didn't come with the corporate prestige she craved. We'd had a few good conversations at previous gatherings. Nothing deep, nothing inappropriate, just the kind of easy rapport that happens when 2 introverts find each other at an extrovert's party and create a small island of calm in the chaos. She was standing near the bookshelf now, the one Samantha had bought at an estate sale and then had me refinish last month, another weekend project that had consumed 2 days of my time and earned a brief "looks good" from Samantha before she posted photos of it on Instagram without mentioning who'd done the work, holding a glass of wine and watching Samantha flirt with Marcus with an expression that looked like discomfort mixed with resignation mixed with something else. Disappointment, maybe, or just fatigue at watching this pattern repeat itself. Our eyes met across the room. She gave me a small, sympathetic smile, the kind of smile that said, "I saw what happened earlier, and I'm sorry you had to hear that. And also, I've been watching this dynamic for a while, and I'm not surprised it's come to this." I nodded slightly in acknowledgement, a small gesture that said, "I know you know." She raised her wine glass in a tiny salute. Solidarity. Then Samantha's voice cut through the ambient noise. "Everyone," she called out, tapping her champagne glass with a fork. "I just want to say thank you all for coming. This apartment has been a dream, and having you all here makes it feel like home." Applause. Cheers. Someone whistled. She continued, riding the attention like a wave. "And I know some of you are wondering about my personal life." She shot a glance toward Marcus, then toward me. "But I believe in keeping things casual, you know? No pressure, no labels, just enjoying life." More laughs. Knowing nods from the crowd. I felt something shift inside me. Not anger, clarity. She wasn't just dismissing me to Marcus. She was dismissing me to everyone, making it public, making it clear that whatever I thought we had, she thought we had less. I set down my beer, straightened my shoulders, and walked directly toward her. The crowd parted slightly. Conversations dimmed as people sensed something was happening. I stepped beside Samantha, close enough to be part of her spotlight, and raised my empty hands like I was about to make a toast. "You're absolutely right, Sam," I said, voice calm and clear. "We should keep things casual." She looked at me, smile frozen, unsure where this was going. I turned to address the room, making eye contact with various guests. "In fact, I think casual is perfect. No pressure, no labels." I paused, then looked directly at her. That's why I'm so comfortable announcing that as of about 30 seconds ago, Samantha and I are keeping things extremely casual. I smiled. In fact, we're keeping them so casual, we're not keeping them at all. The room went dead silent. Samantha's face drained of color. "What are you—" I turned to her fully, voice gentle but firm. "You introduced me as just a boyfriend. Someone who wasn't serious. Someone who didn't really matter." I shrugged. "So I'm correcting the record. I'm not your boyfriend anymore. You're right. We weren't that serious." I raised an imaginary glass toward her. "Cheers. To new beginnings and old lessons." Then, in one smooth motion, I turned toward Lena, who was watching with wide eyes, and extended my hand. "Lena," I said quietly, "would you like to get some air? I think this party's gotten a bit stuffy." She stared at me for a moment, processing. Then something like relief crossed her face, followed by the smallest hint of a smile. She set down her wine glass and took my hand. "Yeah," she said. "I'd like that." We walked toward the door. The crowd parted like the Red Sea. Nobody spoke. Someone's champagne glass made a small clinking sound as it was set down too hard on the coffee table. The music kept playing, some indie playlist I'd spent hours curating to match Samantha's aesthetic, creating a surreal soundtrack to the moment. Samantha stood frozen in the middle of her perfect apartment, surrounded by her carefully curated guests, watching her boyfriend, ex-boyfriend, walk out hand in hand with one of her closest friends. Her mouth was slightly open, like she wanted to say something but couldn't figure out what words could possibly salvage this situation. Marcus looked uncomfortable, holding his expensive wine and probably regretting every decision that led him to this party. The other co-workers exchanged glances, some shocked, some entertained, all of them knowing they'd witnessed something they'd be talking about for months. As we reached the door, I heard Marcus whisper to someone behind us, "Did that just happen?" And someone else, I think it was Monica, Samantha's work friend, responded quietly, "Oh my God, yes it did." I didn't look back. Didn't need to. I could feel the weight of their stares on my back, could sense the energy in the room shifting from party atmosphere to gossip fodder. I opened the door for Lena. She walked through, and I followed, letting it close softly behind us. Not a slam, not a dramatic exit punctuated by noise, just a quiet closing, an ending that whispered instead of shouted. I didn't leave out of anger. I left because I'd already outgrown her version of love. The night air hit us like a reset button. Cool, clean, quiet compared to the ambient noise of the party we'd just left. We stood on the sidewalk outside Samantha's building for a moment, still holding hands, both of us processing what had just happened. Then Lena started laughing. Not mean laughter, not mocking, just release. Like she'd been holding her breath for hours and finally exhaled. "Oh my God," she said, covering her mouth. "Oh my God, Ethan. Did that just happen?" I found myself smiling. Really smiling, for the first time all evening. Yeah, we did. That was," she searched for words, "that was the most composed middle finger I've ever seen anyone give. I prefer to think of it as setting a boundary. You held my hand and walked out of your girlfriend's party in front of 50 people. That's not a boundary. That's a statement." "Ex-girlfriend," I corrected. And yeah, I guess it was. We started walking. No destination. Just moving away from the building, from the party, from the scene we'd created. After a block of comfortable silence, Lena spoke quietly. "I'm sorry she said that. The just a boyfriend thing, that was cruel. Was it true?" I asked. "From what you saw, was I just casual to her?" Lena hesitated, choosing her words carefully. I think Samantha loves the idea of relationships more than actual relationships. She loves having a boyfriend when it makes her look good, when it's convenient, when it fits her narrative. But the moment it requires real vulnerability or commitment, she trailed off. She minimizes it, I finished. Yeah. We walked another block. Found ourselves at a small park with benches overlooking the water. City lights reflected off the surface, making everything look like a postcard. We sat down. She finally let go of my hand, but didn't move away. "I've been uncomfortable for months," Lena admitted, looking out at the water. "Watching how she treated you, the little dismissive comments that she'd pass off as jokes. The way she'd flirt with other guys in front of you and then act like you were being insecure if it bothered you. The way she'd take credit for things you did, like they were just naturally hers because you were together." "Like the party," I said. "Like the entire party. Like everything, really. She told everyone she planned it herself. Sent photos to the group chat showing off her apartment, her aesthetic, her hosting skills. Never mentioned that you paid for half of it, that you did all the actual work while she directed from the couch with a wine glass, that you spent a whole Saturday hanging those lights while she went to brunch with Monica." I felt something loosen in my chest. Validation, maybe. Or just relief that I wasn't crazy. That someone else had seen what I'd been seeing. "Why didn't you say anything?" I asked. She turned to look at me. "Would you have listened? People in relationships don't want to hear criticism, especially from friends of their partner. They want support. They want people to tell them everything's fine. I figured you'd either see it yourself eventually, or you wouldn't. Either way, it wasn't my place to interfere. I tried once, actually. Asked her if she appreciated how much you did for her. She laughed and said, 'He likes doing that stuff. He's a helper.' like it was your personality trait instead of you going above and beyond for someone who barely noticed. And now? Now you interfered with yourself pretty spectacularly, so I figure all bets are off. Now I can be honest." She paused. "Want the honest truth?" "Always." "I've been waiting for you to leave her for 6 months. Ever since her birthday party when she made that toast thanking everyone who came and didn't mention you once, even though you'd planned the whole thing and paid for the venue. I watched your face during that toast. You looked empty, like you just realized something sad and couldn't unrealize it." She was right. That had been a turning point I hadn't fully acknowledged. Standing in a restaurant I'd booked, eating food I'd ordered, listening to Samantha thank everyone except me for making her birthday special. "I almost left that night," I admitted. "Why didn't you? I thought maybe I was being petty, keeping score. That love wasn't about credit or recognition, that if I really loved her, I wouldn't need the acknowledgement." "That's bullshit," Lena said flatly. "Love absolutely requires recognition. Not constant praise or validation, but basic acknowledgement that you exist and contribute, that you matter." "Yeah, I'm starting to understand that." I laughed. Actually laughed. "Fair point." My phone buzzed. Then again, then a third time in rapid succession. I pulled it out. 3 texts from Samantha. "What the hell was that?" "You embarrassed me in front of everyone." "Really? With Lena?" I showed the screen to Lena. She read them and snorted. "Notice how none of those say, 'I'm sorry,' or 'I didn't mean it.'" "Yeah," I noticed. I typed a reply. "You said I was just a boyfriend. I figured you wouldn't mind." Sent. Immediately my phone rang. Samantha calling. I declined it. It rang again. Declined again. Then a text. "We need to talk. Now." I turned off my phone and put it in my pocket. "You're not going to answer?" Lena asked. "No. She doesn't want to talk. Oh, she wants to control the narrative. She wants to explain why what she said wasn't what she meant, and why I overreacted, and why I should apologize for embarrassing her. She wants to rewrite what just happened so she's the victim." I looked at Lena. I'm done letting her rewrite reality. Lena nodded slowly. "Good." We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the water, listening to the distant sound of the city. Finally, Lena spoke. "For what it's worth, I always thought you were too good for her." I turned to look at her. "Yeah? Yeah. You're kind, patient. You actually listen when people talk instead of just waiting for your turn to speak. You pay attention to details. You show up. You do the work." She shrugged. "Samantha never appreciated that. She just expected it." "And you? Me? Do you appreciate that?" She met my eyes. Something passed between us. Not attraction, exactly. Or maybe it was attraction, but the grown-up kind. The kind based on recognition and respect rather than just chemistry. "I do," she said quietly. "I really do." Back at the party, chaos had erupted. I wouldn't learn the full details until later, through mutual friends who thought I deserved to know the fallout, but apparently the moment Lena and I left, the entire energy shifted like someone had flipped a switch. Samantha stood frozen for about 30 seconds, processing what had just happened in front of 50 witnesses. Her face cycled through several expressions: shock, anger, humiliation, and finally a forced smile that fooled no one. Then she tried to laugh it off. "Well, that was dramatic," she said, voice brittle and too loud. "Anyway, where were we? Marcus, you were telling me about the campaign?" But the guests weren't buying it. The spell was broken. Her carefully curated image had cracked, and everyone had seen what was underneath. Someone who didn't respect the person who'd helped her build everything they were standing in. The conversations resumed, but they were muted. Awkward. People kept glancing toward the door, toward Samantha, trading meaningful looks. The party had transformed from celebration to spectacle, and no amount of forced enthusiasm could reverse it. Marcus, to his credit, apparently excused himself shortly after, reading the room with the social intelligence that had probably made him successful in the first place. "Early meeting tomorrow," he said, though everyone knew it was only 9:30 on a Saturday night. "Great party, Sam." He left the expensive wine on the counter and disappeared before she could try to salvage whatever connection she'd been building with him all evening. The other coworkers followed suit within 20 minutes, making polite excuses about early mornings and prior commitments and babysitters. Each departure making Samantha's smile more strained, her laughter more forced. Monica tried to stay, tried to be supportive, but even she seemed uncomfortable. According to later reports, she'd pulled Samantha aside and asked what had happened, why Ethan would do that, and Samantha had apparently said, "I don't know. I made one little joke and he completely overreacted. He's always been insecure." Monica, who'd been there, who'd heard the "just a boyfriend" comment, had apparently just nodded slowly and said nothing, which was its own form of judgment. Within an hour, the party had cleared out. Samantha was left alone in her perfect apartment, surrounded by string lights and half-empty champagne glasses and the wreckage of her own making. The playlist I'd created was still running, now providing soundtrack to an empty room. She called me 17 times that night. I know because I turned my phone back on the next morning and saw all the notifications. 17 missed calls, 23 text messages. Each one progressing through what looked like the 5 stages of grief, compressed into 6 hours of escalating desperation. Denial. Stop being ridiculous. Come back and we'll talk about this like adults. This is childish. Anger. You made me look like an idiot in front of everyone I work with. My boss was there. How could you do that to me? You humiliated me. Bargaining. I didn't mean it the way it sounded. You know I care about you. It was just a stupid joke that came out wrong. Please just let me explain, please. Depression. I can't believe this is happening. We were so good together. We had plans. We had a future. Please don't throw away everything we built over one stupid moment. Acceptance, though not really. Fine. If that's how you want to end things, fine. But you'll regret this. You'll realize you overreacted, and by then it'll be too late. Good luck finding someone who puts up with your sensitivity. I read through all of them while drinking my morning coffee in my own apartment, sitting on my couch that Samantha had once called 2 bachelor pad and tried to get me to replace. I didn't respond to any of them. Each message revealed exactly what I'd suspected. She was upset about being embarrassed, not about hurting me, angry about the public nature of the breakup, not about the breakdown of the relationship, focused entirely on how this affected her image, her reputation, her standing with coworkers. Not once in 23 messages did she say, "I'm sorry I called you just a boyfriend." Not once did she acknowledge that her words had been hurtful. It was all about her. It had always been all about her. I blocked her number and finished my coffee in peace. 3 days later, Samantha showed up at my apartment. I was making coffee when the buzzer rang. I checked the video intercom and saw her standing there, looking nothing like the polished woman from the party. Hair in a messy ponytail, minimal makeup, red eyes, yoga pants, and an oversized sweatshirt. I almost didn't buzz her up, but curiosity won out. Or maybe closure, or maybe just the desire to finish this conversation on my terms. When I opened the door, she looked smaller than I remembered, diminished. "Hi," she said quietly. "Hi. Can we talk?" I stepped aside, letting her in, didn't offer coffee, didn't invite her to sit, just stood there, arms crossed, waiting. She looked around my apartment like she was seeing it for the first time, even though she'd been here dozens of times. I'm sorry. About what I said at the party." "Okay." It was stupid. I was just trying to seem cool in front of Marcus, and I didn't think... You didn't think I'd mind being dismissed in front of your friends? It was a joke, Ethan. You know I didn't mean it. This was the moment. The moment where I could either accept her explanation and slide back into the pattern, or I could stand firm. I shook my head slowly. You meant it the moment you said it. Jokes just reveal the truth people hide behind. That's not fair, isn't it? Think about it, Sam. Really think. How many times over the past year have you introduced me to people? How many times did you make me feel like an accessory instead of a partner? How many times did you take credit for things we did together? How many times did you flirt with other guys in front of me and then tell me I was being insecure when it bothered me? Her face flushed. I never. You did. Constantly. And I let it slide because I thought maybe you didn't realize you were doing it. Maybe it was just your personality. Maybe I was being too sensitive. I took a breath. But that moment at the party made everything clear. You don't see me as a partner. You see me as a supporting character in your story. That's not true, she said, but her voice had no conviction. It is true, and the sad thing is, I don't even think you did it maliciously. I think you genuinely believe that's how relationships work. Someone takes the lead, and someone else supports them. Someone shines, and someone else hangs the lights. Tears started falling down her face. I'm sorry. I'll do better. I'll change. Just, please don't end this over one stupid comment. I'm not ending this over one comment. I'm ending this because that comment revealed 14 months of reality I'd been ignoring. You told me exactly how you felt about me, about us. I'm just finally listening. But I love you, she said desperately. Do you? Or do you love having a boyfriend who makes your life easier? She opened her mouth to respond, then closed it. No answer came. That's what I thought, I said quietly. She wiped her eyes, smearing mascara across her cheek. What about Lena? What about her? Are you with her now? That's not really your business anymore. She's my friend. She was your friend. I don't think she'll be calling you anytime soon. Samantha's face hardened. So you're just going to steal my friend and humiliate me and act like you're the good guy here? I didn't steal anyone. I walked out of a party where I wasn't respected. Lena chose to come with me. That's not theft. That's her making her own decision. This is so fucked up. Yeah, it is. But I didn't make it fucked up. I just stopped pretending it wasn't. She stood there for another moment, looking lost. Then she turned toward the door. As she reached for the handle, she spoke without looking back. You're going to regret this. Maybe, I said. But I doubt it. She left. The door closed, and I felt lighter than I had in months. 3 months later, I was sitting in a cafe on a Saturday afternoon. The same cafe where Samantha and I used to meet for brunch when we first started dating, back when everything felt new and possible and uncomplicated. But I wasn't thinking about Samantha. I was thinking about the book I was reading, about the work project I'd just finished, about the plans I had for the weekend. I was thinking about my own life, not our life, mine. The door chimed and Lena walked in, scanning the room until she spotted me. She smiled, genuine, warm, and walked over. Sorry I'm late, she said, sliding into the seat across from me. Meeting ran long. No problem, I ordered you a latte. You remembered my order? Of course. She smiled again, and I realized I'd been seeing that smile a lot lately. Lena and I had spent a lot of time together over the past 3 months. Not dating exactly. Not at first, just spending time. Coffee, walks, movies. Conversations that went until 2 a.m. about everything and nothing. She was easy to be around, no games, no performance, just honesty. We hadn't defined what we were doing, hadn't put a label on it, but it felt different than anything I'd had with Samantha. It felt like partnership. How was your meeting? I asked. Good. They approved the campaign I pitched, 3 months of work, finally paying off. That's amazing. Congratulations. Thanks. I'm just glad it's done. I can actually relax this weekend. Any plans? Not really. Maybe I'll finally clean my apartment. Maybe I'll just read and do nothing. She looked at me. You? Similar. Though I was thinking about checking out that new gallery downtown, if you wanted to come. I'd like that. My phone buzzed. I glanced at it automatically. Samantha's name flashed on the screen. Text message. I miss you. Can we talk? Lena noticed me looking. Her again? Yeah. That's what, the 3rd time this month? 4th. Are you going to respond? I looked at the message for a moment, then turned off my phone and put it face down on the table. No, I said. There's nothing left to say. Lena nodded. Good. We sat in comfortable silence for a moment, drinking our coffee, watching people pass by outside the window. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you'd stayed? Lena asked quietly. If you just let it slide that night? I considered the question. Sometimes. But then I remember how I felt standing there, listening to her dismiss me, and I remember how I felt walking out, and I know I made the right choice. Even though it was messy? Especially because it was messy. Clean endings are a myth. Real change is always messy. That's surprisingly philosophical for someone who barely finished his coffee. I laughed. I contain multitudes. Apparently. We finished our drinks and left the cafe. Started walking aimlessly, the way we often did. No destination. Just movement and conversation and the simple pleasure of being around someone who saw you clearly and liked what they saw. My phone stayed in my pocket. Silent. Ignored. Samantha's name would probably flash again in a few days. Another text. Another attempt to rewrite history or reclaim something she'd thrown away. But it didn't matter anymore. She'd called me just a boyfriend. I'd become the man she'd always call the one that got away. Not because I was perfect, not because she suddenly realized my worth, but because I'd respected myself enough to walk away when respect wasn't returned. And that, more than any dramatic exit or clever comeback, was the real victory. Respect is the foundation of love. Once that cracks, the walls collapse quietly. I'd learned that lesson, finally, and I wasn't going back to build on broken ground.